Melissa Ambers, and I'm with Strategic Blueprint Consulting, and I have partnered with SME to have this leadership panel discussion today. And I have some gentlemen on that wanted to jump in on the conversation to share their thoughts on leadership training. So let's go around the room and we'll let each one of these gentlemen introduce themselves and let you know where they're from. Desi, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you, Amber. My name is Desi. I live here in Toronto, Canada. It's a little bit cold today, but we're used to it. Us Canadians are used to that. I run a consulting practice called Building Perspective, and it's all about creating operational improvements for companies using the well-known principles of Lean Six Sigma. So that's a little bit about myself.
Okay, Clint.
Yeah, my name is Clint Lancaster. I'm the plant quality manager for Baltimore operations for a company called Interlocks. We do articulating material handling, robotic conveyor systems. Been here for about a year. Prior to that, I was in the plant production at Harley Davidson for a while, and then prior to that, in engineering director.
Okay, Wayne.
Back from Houston, Texas. Been involved in the oil and gas. My company's name is Intuitivum. It's basically a consulting engineering firm. I basically came out of, for many years, the downhole tool manufacturing in the oil and gas industry. Heavy manufacturing. What I've tried to do now, my specialty is automation, robotics. So what my point is trying to get into the smaller and medium-sized companies to help them upgrade from where my background was in the Fortune 500 companies.
Okay, and Calvin, I know you jumped on a little late. We're just doing introductions right now.
All right, sorry about that. My name is Calvin Ostrom. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I split my time between two things. I've got a startup that I'm the chief operations officer for, that we manufacture gates for residential elevators. And then I spend the other half of my time consulting through Direct North Consulting on operations management. And my background's mechanical engineering, lean manufacturing, and sort of operations management roles.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for jumping on and joining me with this panel discussion today. And to give you a little bit about me, I have worked in the manufacturing supply chain for like 15 plus years. I left that and just really started working for like an appliance management company. And within the last year and a half, I decided to branch off on my own, and I created Strategic Blueprint Consulting LLC. And basically, we are a firm that works with organizations to help with processes, business organization, those process improvement, modernization, leadership training, and skills. And with the way our new normal is for now, there are so many organizations that's going hybrid or full-blown remote. And leadership has always kind of been an issue, you know, pre-COVID, and even more so now because of the situation. And we want to just have this open forum to talk about, you know, leadership training. You know, what are your thoughts on some of those leaderships? So I'm going to throw some questions out there, and like I said, just jump in and whoever wants to answer those questions. The first one we're going to go with is, what makes a great leader?
Is it just me, or is your you seem to be breaking up, Melissa?
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Now.
Okay. All right. What makes a great leader?
Oh, when I start off, I think I'm not going to go off on a sermon, but I'd say the first crucial point to being a great leader is to be a great listener. Listening without intent, listening without agenda, and just listening to whatever is being heard, and keeping the analysis or opinions to after, you know, to a little bit later in the game. But I'll say that piece. I think the first piece is just being a good listener.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, the real question is if we're talking about leadership in global terms, or are we talking about SME leadership like this chapter leadership? Because I think that frames it a little differently.
And we'll talk leadership in general terms, but those general terms can be, for a particular organization, your experience as a leader, or, the experience from someone that was a leader for you. So, just share your experience with that.
Well, I concur with Disney. It's a good listener, that's paramount, but also being a strategic thinker sometimes, and being able to see how to get, I'm big on culture. I think now my experience has been through a lot of organizations, and some of them work better than others. And it is a cultural thing. And it's hard to, I think now with the new generation coming up, it's a little different than it was when I came up. Basically, I'm a baby boomer, so, I'm at the end of my career, but the new generation is quite different, and you have to be a listener. And I think the focus on forging a organization that's a team rather than, and that sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but it is not. There's one vendor here that started his, well, he's had a process of lean for many years, but he always brought in the experts. And he's finally said, we got a little book and we started doing it ourselves and didn't bring any outside people in. We just started basically self-taught. We've seen the experts come in and it would work for a while, but then it wait. So sustainable, and that's part of the leadership, is being a sustaining group. It's just not the culture, but keeping it going with turnover, and especially the younger generation kind of adapt in there.
Okay, with leadership, and this is something I would like each of you to answer. With leadership, what are some of the things that you see that are not happening, and the reason so many organizations are not providing their leadership with training on a regular basis?
I can start off on that one. I think a big thing in terms of why it's not happening is so many people are so busy fighting day-to-day fires and dealing with the emergencies in their business that they don't carve out the time, both at the leadership level and at the various management levels, to focus on that training. And I think especially all the way through management, but the higher up people are, a big focus they need to focus on is coaching and developing people, and making that development of people a part of their sort of daily purpose in their work. And if they do that, that helps that culture and team and bring everyone in the same direction, because you're continually guiding and developing those people in the direction that you want the company to go.
Okay.
Yeah, those are good points. I probably would also say, in going back to the original question as well, I take kind of maybe a little bit different approach at it, but as a leader, I often say that my job is to work myself out of a job. So it's important for me as a leader to develop my team and to trust my team. So trust is a big, going back to the culture statement too, trust is a big factor in how we can get things accomplished. And there's things that we need to do with our people to grow our people, to instill that trust in them, that we're here for them and that we're going to grow them. And then what I try to do is I keep trying to move, the people that are good in training and develop them into the leadership realm. So I think my job as a leader is to develop leaders.
Okay, Desi.
Yeah, I think, I get around quite a bit as a consultant, working in all sorts of companies, big and small, in different industries. And I think one of the things I see is there's a lot of people that ended up in leadership roles for a variety of career reasons and monetary reasons, and they're not there necessarily for the right reasons. So they're also making decisions that are going to help themselves, get the biggest return on investment for their own personal career. And that gets into the way of a team success, of a company success. That's what I see quite often. I've worked in startups, I've built startups, I've sold startups, and worked in large corporations as well. But once a leader's mind is focused on the dollar, and that particular objective becomes more important than anything else, creates all sorts of interesting management behavior, shareholder behavior, everything else, and it corrupts the whole ecosystem. We talk about culture, but that's the kind of that's the behavior that can poison that culture.
Okay. Wayne, did you want to share?
Oh, I was going to agree. I've seen that's I don't know. I've seen like you say, some leaders that are just basically out for themselves. Being here in Houston, we have a good example called Enron. That I worked with several people that actually their spouses worked at Enron, and that's the worst thing that they did, is that they basically they screwed their own people. They were telling them, and they lost. I know personally, people lost their whole investment that they had made in the company because they believed the hype, and basically it was at the people at the top. And unfortunately, like many things in this world, the ones that really should be attacked got away with it. So, they let some of them, and I had no sympathy for the people that were brought up. So I think they deserve. I was going to say there's a need in the leadership of integrity, and I think that goes back to what I'm a big fan of Alan McCallie, who was the guy that turned Ford around. And listen to him talk. I've seen him in person 2 or 3 times. The guy has really got, he's really a communicator, but he also has a vision. And that's one of the things that what he did with Ford is go back to the original vision that Henry Ford had for the company. And sometimes I think that's where that strategic vision comes in. I remember, this dates me a little bit, but I'm going back to the quality movement in the 80s, when everybody was running around trying to figure out why Japan can do things and we couldn't. And there was a gentleman that was the head of the Japanese productivity center here, and he said he was very complimentary. He said, "But we learned everything we do from y'all. that y'all taught us. We just forgot." And this video came on, and they were quoting the president of Ford at the time, and said, "Yeah, we lost sight of. We were trying to make money instead of making good cars." And I think that's the telltale. I mean, that's one example, but one of the things that I think here locally, we had a guy named Gordon Bethune who took Continental Airlines and turned it around. And he did it with multiple reasons, but one of the things he did was got people to work together. But he took a simple metric of, we're going to be judged like everybody else judges, but he hit the metric as not only at the time he was the #1 airline, but it was also the #1 place to work. And that's a challenge. So people enjoyed working there. And I know several people personally that worked there, and it was a definite change when he left, and not for the better, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I get.
Go ahead. On with that, it's like, somebody mentioned like trusting. The trust is a huge factor. And how would you suggest that leaders work better with their team members? Because now so many team members, they're afraid to say certain things, to bring things to their, the management, supervisor, whoever their direct report is, because they are upper management, for fear of not agreeing with what they say, and then the leaders retaliating, and it's just all these political things that happen, and people are just afraid to talk and say, how can we, how do you think we can change the open communication, that open door policy again, to where we're colleagues, and if there's something wrong, bring it to me. If I'm not doing something right, let me know. Let me see how I can fix it, or let us discuss it. What do you think needs to happen in those type of scenarios?
I can start. Yeah, I'll start off. I mean, we can't expect employees, or we can't expect any of our family and friends to trust us if we're not, if we're not trustworthy. So if you have a culture where the leadership are people that we don't trust, there's only one action to solve that problem. It's pretty simple. Show by your behavior, your language, and your actions that you are trustworthy. Because if you're not being a trustworthy person, people can't hold you accountable to your commitments and your agreements, you can ask as much as you want. I mean, we all know what a liar looks like and talks like. We're not going to trust them. So we got, as leaders, we have to be trustworthy. Otherwise, if you say you're a leader that believes in equitable compensation for everyone in the company, you don't create policies and procedures that create equitable compensation, why would anyone trust you? So I think to me, it's very, it's just one thing. We have to be trustworthy in order to ask for that trust.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel that and we're keen on a lot of things, and it kind of generates, through the years, it's kind of generated different topics and different discussions. But we do put we do put profits ahead of people, and we should be putting people ahead of profits. One of the things that I've always done is I felt one of the things that's always missing is the training. It seems like the first thing that moves or that leaves is training and paying for training. So I try to instill that growth opportunity and training opportunity for all my people. Try to get them into their certifications, whether it's SME certifications or ASQ certifications, kind of help promote that, and with that comes that trust and the communication and the listening. You really got to trust. And what I tell my people a lot of times is, when we're in this room, I want you to tell me, because I don't know everything. I need you guys. It's I've gotten the best ideas from the janitor sometimes, but when we're in here and we're meeting, we need to get all these things discussed and feel comfortable talking. But then when we walk out of the door, we need to be one voice and one direction, one team. So, I try to instill on my team to, feel free to talk in our meetings and stuff. And we do, and we have very candid, we have a challenge culture, and that's, we say, please do challenge us, because if we don't have all the facts on the, in front of us, and we can look at things, we can't make informed decisions, So I need my team to talk, and, and we can work through these issues. But fundamental is training. And it always seems that companies eliminate training when they're trying to save $1, and they're not putting people before profits.
Right. That's a really, really great point. Earlier, I think it was Calvin mentioned that, everybody's just so busy, doing everything, and projects are coming up. This have to be done, that have to be done, these phone calls, and all these different things that need to be done. If a company is that busy to where they cannot block out that time to train, then it comes to a point, one, either you don't have the right skill set on staff to do the job that needs to be done, or you need to hire some more people, or either outsource some of those things that need to be done. For those that's in that busy, state, would you agree that those are some of the things that they may need to start looking at?
Absolutely. I came from a company that was a very high task before I got to Interlocks. We had on our production floor, we had a tack time of about 75 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
We had probably 50 workstations that were on that tack time. So things move fast, and you know, sometimes you just too much going on and you just can't fit it in there. But again, I think to your point, we have to drill that time in. We have to put that in what we ended up doing in my previous company was actually loaded in a certain amount of time every day, 10 minutes into the PLC program so that the line didn't run at a certain time for us to do those immediate on the floor training for our teams and our people. Because if you don't force it in, it won't happen. It's too easy to be the next day comes, you know, and the next week comes and it doesn't happen unless you can really, you know, put it as part of your schedule.
No, I agree. Yeah.
To build on that, I think it goes back to Covey's concept of the rocks and fitting the rocks into your life before you fit the pebbles and the sand in. And if you don't find a way to get those rocks in, they don't happen. And so I've seen companies create work orders that are put to the shop floor that are basically the work order is training. And
yeah, that's a good idea.
That job means we're all going to train. I've seen companies take Saturdays and basically pay people overtime and bring in food and make it a bit of an event to do the training.
We just actually kicked that off. In fact, we just had our first Saturday boot camp for 4 hours where you could volunteer to come in and we paid you for 4 hours and we did critical skills training for the production floor. Actually, that's interesting you mentioned that because we just started this last Saturday for the first time and it went over real well. So, you know, again, I think people before profits.
That's good. I'm glad that you know, that's something that you are starting and that in the long run, you'll start seeing the change and the morale and, you know, all of your employees coming to work and doing the things that they need to do. All of that's going to shift by taking that little time to invest into the people that you have, you know, working at your company. What are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make and not correcting them?
I'll start with that. I think one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is they get together and they make, you know, the upcoming year. I mean, they make everything about the upcoming year. So we want next year to have, you know, double-digit profits, double-digit this. Everything is about next year. And what you don't realize is when you put that much pressure on one single 12-month period, you're robbing from, you know, your second year, your third year, your fourth year out. So you put all your time and interest in that 1 year rather than create sort of a sustainable 10-year plan and break things out. Because everyone wants, you know, dividends and profits and everyone wants everything as quick as possible. But as a result of doing that, you create such a bubble and a pressure for a company. And lots of things go out the window, like we talked about, you know, training and coaching and skills and, you know, team meetings and some fun time. All that stuff goes out the window because we're so focused on creating strong financial results next year. I see that happen all time and time again.
See, I think that goes back to leadership because that's the leader that's looking for. I worked under one scenario.
Wayne, you're getting real choppy. You're going in and out, Wayne.
Okay. Yeah, my internet connection must be. Let me cut my video off. Maybe it'll be clearer. In any case, the better ones actually had a 3 and 5 year plan because in reality, in the oil field is very up and downs. I mean, it's feast or famine. And you have to maintain that when we're just now coming out of a real deep chasm of, and we're not all back yet. I think the rest of the country is a little bit better ahead of us. But I'll go back to a friend of mine, Scott, he builds robots and automation systems. And so he cross-trained his guys. If they had welders, they could go in and look, because he does all kinds of welding. So he was cross-training them with his own people. I mean, it wasn't a formal thing. It was putting a a guy that was doing just primarily MIG welding and to do TIG and plasma and some other skill sets that they use in that business to grow their business. And it makes people more knowledgeable if they can move on. And then being able to promote people from within, and sometimes they leave the company, but have that attitude that if somebody wants to take extra time, and I like the idea of coming in on your own time or coming in off shift, because sometimes in production you can't shut down the machinery. But if you offer people the ability to come in and improve themselves, or even in many companies subsidize their training if they go to a community college or even a college, that helps, I think, cement that trust aspect of it. And then the other thing is communication. I think you've got to be able to tell people, people know when times are bad. And in our day, it's changed. Like everything else has changed in the world. It used to be one metric was the number of rigs working. That was a big metric, and everybody watched it, because when it went down, we knew we were going in one of those valleys. But you have to do that so when you have the uptick, that you'll be ready. You have people, and it's I think that communication is probably the biggest. And I mean, tell people that people know, they know when times are not good, or and I think that's part of the cementing that trust aspect of it.
Okay. What are some of the qualities that's lacking with leaders today?
Just that communication.
Real simple.
Yeah. Well, I think I think one of the things that we don't see enough of probably among our leaders is empathy and letting go of their ego. I think if leaders can be a little bit more humble and understand that to, like we've talked, the listening and the communication, but to be a little more humble and let your ego go, and not think that you're really embrace the team, be the team as a group as a whole, and not be you don't have to be the Superman or the savior or whatever, and just check your ego at the door. I think will help a lot of leaders.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd add to that. I've been around the block a few times. I think when I was a bit younger in my career, most of the leaders grew from within their practice. So if you were an engineering manager, for example, you were an engineer, you were a junior engineer, intermediate, and then you grew up, and then you ended up managing an engineering department. These days, I see people with no background at all, and they're a manager of operations or production, or engineering managers that don't have a background in engineering. And I'm not saying everyone has to be degreed and certified in everything that they're doing, but
right.
When you don't know the basic mechanisms and the body of knowledge that you're managing, it's hard to be an effective coach and leader for the people under you. And it's an unusual thing, but it's, at least in Canada, I can speak in Canada, it's a lot more common than it used to be.
And I don't know if that's is much of an issue if the leader can understand their shortfalls. If they can understand and realize that, hey, I do have shortcomings, and that's why I do need the team, and building your team. And I just had this conversation with my team the other day about, understanding just the basics of team building, that you have the whatever the forming, norming, storming, and or performing the you're going to go through those. So we get new people on, and we're going to have issues, but as long as we can understand that we all bring something to the table, and we're not all that in a bag of chips, that I think they'll have more success.
Oh, I think that's true. And part of the leadership is picking the support team that you have important. They have the expertise. You don't have the in engineering that you have a really top-notch engineer working for you that understands that. And being in the oil field, in fact, most of the leaders have an engineering or science background. That's just reality because it is so engineering dominant. Most CEOs have had an engineering background, and it's hard because a lot of engineers are not trained in the business, so they have to be grown in cultured. I had to make that decision whether I wanted to go into the technical side or the management side, and yeah, and you have to have people that have that choice because some people don't like leadership. And that's worse if you promote somebody that's not really liking the floor, that you got a real good worker and you promote him to leader because he's the best they got. Sometimes he may not have the skill sets to manage people. He may be great actually with the knowledge of it. And that's where you have to have that parallel development side. But I agree, teamwork is the keynote, and being open and having that description.
What do you think some of the those things are where some leaders are afraid to step forward to say, you know what, I may have the skills here, but I don't have the people skills. I don't know how to do this. I'm not comfortable in this space. What are some of those things you think leaders are afraid of to come forward to say, I don't have these skills? Not that I can't do the job, but I don't have these skills.
I think the biggest problem is you got the ego thing coming in, because that's an ego thing. They're too proud to accept that they don't know everything and they seek out information. We used to always say the art of engineering is not knowing everything, but knowing where to go talk to somebody. And that's what SME does. I mean, that's where it started from. Started in Dearborn because the guys wanted to share their knowledge, and you know, it's the attribute that we don't sell that much. I know I've got we're trying to revitalize a student chapter next week, and that's one of the things we challenge, because I mean, face it, the younger generation thinks everything on the internet, and we have leaders, I think, that because of the ego side are afraid to admit that they don't really know that.
Okay.
I think it's a combination of the ego side and also just the sort of a general belief that as a leader, you need to know everything or people will not respect you. That if I don't have all the right answers, then I might lose my employees' respect. But I think as a leader, if you turn that around to be very open, you'll gain that trust and communication and make your employees feel more valued. If you let them know, hey, I don't always know all the right answers. I want your input. I want your ideas as well. And I think another major point that a lot of leaders are afraid to admit they don't know is how to manage conflict. Because conflict comes up in the workplace all the time. And conflict isn't inherently bad. You can have good conflict as well, depending on how you manage it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think a lot of young leaders or new leaders are scared of that they're going to have an employee come up and disagree with them, and then they got to show their authority, and you create bad conflict instead of it being well, let's discuss this. Let me understand. Let's figure out together. And you can turn most conflict into a productive, constructive thing. But people aren't willing to admit that they don't know how to do that.
That's been one of my struggles, just kind of talking what Wayne was saying a minute ago about technical versus management side. You know, I've kind of went back and forth over the years, and it's hard. That's the hardest part, you know. And I didn't take management roles a few times just because I was not feel that I felt comfortable enough to be prepared to handle that conflict, and that kind of just that environment. I'm, you know, like I said, I think I'm more of a I guess you'd say a transformational type of a leader as opposed to a very strict, you know, authoritarian type of of a leader. So so I knew going in that it's going to be work on my part to make sure that I can figure out how to handle people and handle those situations, because nobody ever likes to go in there and give the bad news, you know.
Yeah.
So that's something that I have to work on. And you know, I guess another thought I had too when you mentioned that is, I think a lot of things that help out is like if we let go of our ego, but we also try to encourage mentorship, you know, or try to find a mentor, find somebody that can help out, because it always helps to have a thought partner, you know, or somebody you can just bounce off that's not really in that chain or not really in that
Yeah.
mode. You can just say, hey, you know, I got this issue, or I got this thought, you know, and somebody to get a sanity check from or something. But yeah, I think getting mentors or encouraging mentorship is probably a big thing too.
They have this thing, and I know this can't be done at organizations, but they have these rooms now to let their frustration out, where you go and just break up all of this stuff. And I think organizations need to create something like that. You know, if they want to, you know, say let's do team building and actually go to those places, could be good. But if they did something inside to where people can it's open forum, just let people vent, good, bad, and have that space to where they can go to just spill out whatever it may be. What do you think about organizations starting to do some things like that, especially right now, you know, with the pandemic and all these different things people going with, everything's costing more money, but we're not getting paid more money. I mean, it's a mixture of a lot of things that's going on right now. What do you think about organizations starting to have a space for something like that?
Well, in Canada, we already have that space. It's called the bar, and we go there every Friday after work.
It's called the bar. Oh, at the bar. Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty standard. All Canadians do it.
I got a feeling that, yeah, that's, I was in a real organization, and on Friday night, we'd go out and have what we call a manufacturing meeting. That was to chastise all the characters that had been giving us trouble. And because it was local to the factory, it was right there. It had a cross of people from the floor sweeper up to the VP. But that was a culture that was developed so that you had that, because everybody knew what their job was, and you could spout off to the VP. And that was kind of a long standing, that the bar was just the meeting place, so to speak. That comes out of the action that what you're talking about. It comes out of the Japanese mode. They were doing that back in when we did. Everybody was trying to copy the Japanese. They use that because they have a very authoritarian society, so they need that more than anything. Part of the Asian culture. And you have to understand that, because especially if you have multiple plants, that's even harder, because it's not only a communication issue, it's a cultural issue. I mean, the culture outside and even with, I'll say this, even with Zoom and all the other things, you still don't get the right, when you're in a room with somebody, and there's a lot of body language you have to read.
Yeah.
Glenn, I saw your hand kind of move. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's to having that room or that space. I think the other side of that is just taking an assertive effort to get to know everybody. Whether it's going to the bar or having a lunch or doing stuff. But I've noticed that it means so much to the team when we do a lunch or we do something and we get together and we can kind of just not be in the formal meeting conference room, but be somewhere else where we can just kind of talk and kind of get to know each other on a more personal basis. I think
It's almost like the military thing, at ease.
at ease, yes, yeah,
At ease.
permission to speak freely.
Yeah.
That's a good example, because the military really is a good example of that, because they're always having to manage people. And that's why I think you get into the extracurricular activities of having an offsite, whether it be a picnic. We used to always go through a company picnic. I know this friend of mine that runs the robotic manufacturer, he takes everybody down to Galveston. And then once a month he has a lunch, and he invites, now he's a smaller company. And my faith, I think, because of technology, the real strength in the future is going to be smaller, more agile companies, because they get to know people, and it's that personal thing that people feel more cohesive, and the technology is enabling a smaller company to be even more effective sometimes than the larger companies. I came from an environment where you had these big dial type automated machines, but now a guy with a 5-axis can do practically anything. And a CAD station and a 5-axis mill and a lathe, you can make practically everything, and people are doing that. You
Heck,
can't get
it's 3D printing now.
well, yeah, which is
You could almost make whatever you want right here in the. So, yeah, they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah. As a process person, I look at, how organizations always say, okay, well, this is how it's always been. We've always done this. We've always used this system or followed this process. With the way technology is changing now, and so many things are becoming available upfront, it may have an expense to it, but you'll see that return over time just by transitioning or shifting over to this new process. What do you agree that organizations should, every 2 to 3 years, I'm not saying completely revamp, but go back and assess, look at the process that they've been following to see, okay, what can we change? Can we save some money by not using as many systems, or do something different? What do you think about organizations doing that, looking at that every 2 to 3 years?
actually, I think, at least in my environment, because it's so dynamic, people are doing that more on a continual basis. So you're always re-examining. I know when I was over in the engineering, we were always looking at and being in a larger company, we were always making the trade shows. We could see the different processes and new equipment. What we started doing though, and this is kind of interesting, I've seen this in my time span, which is long. My company, we used to get a new piece of equipment in, and basically the engineering guys, the project managers, bought the equipment, they did all the sourcing, and then it showed up on the factory floor. We bolted together and said, okay, you guys have at it. And
Figure it out.
it kind of sort of worked. Well, then we started changing, and we actually did a team effort where we took the top lead man or operator, his supervisor, and we went off to the machine runoff. Now this was, because the American industry of machine tools had gone kaput for the most part. There's still some exceptions, but we wind up going to all the different, all my trips around the world were usually staying on business, either running a machine off or looking at a plant. And, these guys have an ownership in the machine. So they got to see the guys that built the machines, whether it be in Germany or Italy or Japan. We bought a lot of German machines and Italian, believe it or not. And that produced that forged a team, because you can't just go through a training and say, we're going to do teamwork and stuff like that. That means that they were part of the process, and their responsibility was to make sure that it came in. And they knew some of the guys at the factory, so they could call some of the, because a lot of machine tool manufacturers are not that large. You know, they'd call the guy that was there when they ran the machine off to get a question. And that's something that you have to build over time. And it costs a little bit of money. You know, at first they said, well, we're spending all these guys sending, and we spend sometimes 4 or 5 people going to a machine runoff. Now, that sounds, but in reality, the expense of a travel, even to Europe, wasn't that significant in the long term. You know, after a couple of years, but it really forged the link not only between your team but also the manufacturer, the OEM that you're.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
right now the speed, just the speed, I think you're right. It is so important to keep reevaluating your strategy and reevaluating your processes and understanding what's out there, because so much is changing so fast. I mean, it's, you know, now we're talking, you know, artificial intelligence, we're talking 3D printing, and we're just so many things that can improve our efficiencies. You know, you can't really rely on just, you know, that's the way we've done it when I hear that's the way we've always done it, I know there's a problem right off the bat. You know, that's gonna be
Yeah.
right. You know, the other one that gets me too is when I got people to say, I'll ask them how their project's going, and they say they're 80% complete. I know it's dead. If they're there at 80% and they can't get to the sustainability, which is always the hardest part, the sustainability is always the hardest part. You know, then I know it's probably dead and needs to be reevaluated, and kind of maybe a new direction needs to go. Things are just moving too fast. That the technology is there. We just need to embrace it.
Well, one of the examples you have to do, because we always talk about being on the bleeding edge of technology. Just having it new doesn't mean that it works as well. And that's one of the things that I think is a challenge when they say we've always done it that way. Well, the second following question is, why do you do it that way? You know, it gets back to the old joke about the mother and the grandmother already cut off the end of the turkey to cook it. They say, why did you always do it? Well, we've always done it. My mother did it, and everything is because they had a small oven.
Yeah.
And
I remember that one.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. And in our industry, there was a lot of tribal knowledge because a lot of it was done over a period, and people had turned over and they didn't remember why they did something. There are reasons for some of it. It's valid. We found that we go off, change the process, and it didn't work. But, you know, and we have to analyze why it didn't work. That was, I had a boss that said, you know, you always fail forward, which was a good attitude. That's another leadership thing, is that, you know, have people feel comfortable about trying something, and, you know, if it doesn't work, you know, I don't think anything works the first time right out of the box. It takes development, and especially when you're getting new processes. And the biggest challenge that we've always had, because we always had the benefit of having, like we did 3D printing almost 20 years ago, because we bought it just to play with it. And you do that, but it may not be your mainstream tool yet. And it helps people get accustomed to it. And, you know, really a 3D printer is nothing more than a rectilinear robot. And in fact, my friend that does a robot, he says he's been in additive manufacturing for years. He's actually perfected software to do additive manufacturing with the welding torch. And that's a big thing, because that is actually one of the technologies that you can do. It's something they always done, they just adapted it. He calls it analogous thinking. When you do something that you've always done, but because of technology like sensors on AI, you're increasing the functionality by using the new technology, but you still have to understand what you're trying to do. So you have to understand the problem. And that's one of the problems we have in the technical realm. And the reason I belong to SME is because the technical things move so fast. You know, when I was going to school, they didn't have 3D printing. It was more the old conventional. In fact, I actually started off on a drafting board. I had to go up to Boston to learn my CAD. We had our first CAD unit back in the, I guess back in the 80s. And, then we had to move, and, believe it or not, engineering is sometimes the hardest ones to move in your technological business, because believe it or not, engineers are kind of set in their ways. And we had a big argument of whether to go into 2D or 3D. And basically we headed it up. At that time, I was in the manufacturing engineering. We needed it because we worked in the 3D world. We were working with 5-axis machines, and we were trying to use product drawings that were 2D. And controversy about changing it. It took us, a discrete project to change it over. So we have all this new technology that the question is, when is it adaptable? You don't want to be in the experimental side, or at least treat it as an experiment. I know one of our tool manufacturers that works for NASA, he bought a $500,000 3D printer, metal printer, just to play around with it because everybody else was talking about it. Yeah, it's not fully implemented. It's really good for small parts, but it's not everything. And so that's what's exciting about this new, the new era we're moving into. It's going to change. It's going to be continual change, because the sensors, just the sensors themselves, they're incorporating AI into things that you don't even know. They don't call it AI, but it's basically software. So it takes a real kind of a learning group that that you're going to be playing around with. And it's a culture that gets back to the culture thing. You have to kind of develop that. It takes a real distinct leader to say, we're going to take and invest this now, rather than trying to make the bottom line for our stock prices.
Right.
And being able to argue that he's got two people. He's got to satisfy the employees, but he also has to satisfy the board, or they get rid of him. So
right. Well, let's, it's, I mean, we can, it's so many things in there of, that we can hit on. And, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And, this conversation, it's not an ending conversation. It's something that's going to continuously be ongoing. But, again, I want to thank everyone for jumping on and having this discussion with us today. And it was a great conversation. So any ending thoughts that anyone wants to leave in about leadership training?
I got one closing thought. Don't tell Clint that your project is 80% done. He's going to can your project.
No, redirect it.
One of the things that I think is lacking, that's why I joined this thing, is leadership training for SME officers and leaders. Because I've had every position, even been on the national committee, but I'm kind of a mentor now and trying to bring younger people in, and they don't know. And a lot of times they don't have the training, if they're young in their career, they've never managed anything, not to the sense that, so we need to have more discrete management. And SME used to do that. We did it locally. And we'd take several chapters. It's back in the days before Zoom, and get together and just pick off different things, like the different officers and things, what the issue is, what they're doing is, a responsibility.
Well,
there's some stuff out there.
Maybe after they see this, that they'll consider picking that back up and doing it again. Calvin, did you have anything you want to leave?
Actually, I'd like to jump on that same point in terms of leadership training, because I think organizations like SME can be a great ground for young leaders that don't have experience as a leader in their company to get leadership experience within SME that translates. And so I did that early on. I was the chapter president in various roles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think SME can promote that and develop that further as an opportunity for people and put tools in place. I don't know if they still do it, but back then I actually went to an SME leadership training, I think in San Diego, where
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
brought leaders from various chapters all down to San Diego. We worked together, went through a bunch of training, and it helped the chapter get better. But it also helped me in my career. It helped me feel more comfortable stepping up and progressing and discussing within the company I was at the time when leadership opportunities came up. So I think it can be a win-win for both the Society of Manufacturing Engineers and the chapters and the companies that are sending their employees.
Excellent point. Excellent.
Good point. Yep, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the one thing I would leave it with is I would just tell young leaders, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. And if you don't work for a leader that can understand that you're gonna make mistakes, then you're probably maybe in the wrong place to work at anyway, because that's how we learn.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help.
That right.
Never be afraid to ask for help, regardless of what it is. Let's go all the way back to the old saying, there's not a stupid question.
Right.
Because someone else could be thinking the same thing that you're thinking, but like, I'm not going to ask that may seem dumb. So ask it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
You know, what's the worst that can happen? So, okay. Well, again, thank you guys for coming on. I want to respect your time, and I'm sure there's other things that you have to do today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Enjoyed it.
All right.
Hey,
Thanks.
Great to meet everyone.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye.